The silence in the arena was the loudest thing I had ever heard. 40 delegates from 40 different worlds had already said no. One after another, they stood. They looked at the training drone waiting in the center of the ring, and they refused. Some gave excuses. Some just shook their heads and sat back down. The proctor at the podium, a tall, silver-skinned being named Vel, was running out of patience and out of time. I was standing at the back of the observation deck, arms crossed, watching the whole thing fall apart. My name is Maya. I was 17. I was only there because my mother worked with the human delegation, and I had begged to come along instead of sitting home for another boring week. I did not plan on saying anything. I did not plan on standing up. But when the last delegate sat down and the proctor asked, one final time, if anyone would attempt the trial, my mouth moved before my brain caught up. I said I would do it. Every head in that massive dome turned toward me at once. I felt my face go hot. My mother, sitting 2 rows down, turned pale as chalk. Around us, translator devices buzzed quietly as 40 species whispered to each other in 40 different languages, all of them asking the same question. Who is this girl, and why is she volunteering for something an entire quadrant of grown adults had just refused? The proctor studied me for a long moment. He reminded me, carefully, that I was not a registered delegate and could not simply step into the ring. But the rules allowed a sponsor. Any full delegation could sponsor an observer for the trial. All eyes shifted to my mother. She looked at me. She looked at the crowd. Then she stood up straight and said she would sponsor me. There was no going back after that. I walked down the long ramp toward the arena floor, while my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. The lighting down there was a deep, cold blue, and it made everything look like it was underwater. The training drone sat perfectly still in the center of the mat, a smooth gray sphere with 3 padded mechanical arms folded against its body. It looked almost gentle, almost harmless. I knew better. I had read the specifications the night before, half out of boredom, half out of curiosity. That machine was built to test reaction time, endurance, and composure under real pressure. It was calibrated to push hard without causing lasting harm, but hard was still hard. I reached the edge of the mat and realized my hands were shaking. I took off my jacket and folded it over the railing, more to give my hands something to do than anything else. Underneath, I was wearing a simple gray shirt and jeans, hardly the outfit for what I was about to attempt. Somewhere above me, in the stands, I heard someone murmur that the human girl was actually going through with it. Vel walked to the edge of the ring and explained the rules one more time, mostly for the benefit of the crowd rather than for me. 90 seconds. I could step outside the ring boundary at any time to end the trial early. There was no shame in stopping. The goal was simply to see how a participant responded to sudden pressure and unpredictable movement. I nodded and stepped onto the mat. The drone's sensors lit up with a soft blue glow as it registered a new participant. Its housing rotated slightly, adjusting to my height and weight. Somewhere far above, the crowd noise dropped to almost nothing. I realized, in that strange floating second before it started, that every single alien in that dome was leaning forward to watch what I would do. Vel called out the start. The drone moved fast, faster than I expected from something that size. Its first padded arm swept toward my side, and instead of jumping back, I turned into the motion and caught the impact on my forearm. It still knocked most of the air out of me, and my arm went instantly numb from elbow to wrist. I gritted my teeth and reminded myself that 90 seconds was not very long. The second arm came from the opposite direction, low and quick. I ducked under it, felt the air move past my ear, and grabbed the edge of the drone's frame as it passed. My father had spent every Sunday morning for the last 4 years teaching me judo in our backyard, insisting it would come in useful someday. I had never once believed him. In that moment, my body remembered every lesson before my mind did. I pulled hard, using the drone's own momentum against it, and it wobbled, overcorrected, and dipped toward the mat. It recovered almost instantly, sensors flashing as it recalculated its approach. But for one brief second, the whole arena had gone completely silent, as if nobody quite believed what they had just seen. The third arm caught me across the shoulder before I could fully reset my stance, and I stumbled sideways, catching myself with one hand on the mat. My knee scraped hard against the surface, and a sharp sting shot up my leg. I pushed myself back up immediately, refusing to let the pause turn into a full stop. Somewhere above me, I thought I heard someone gasp. The drone circled once, testing a new angle, then came at me low. I sidestepped, this time keeping my balance better, and drove my shoulder into its frame, the way my father had shown me 100 times in practice. It rocked backward, servos whining as it tried to stabilize itself, and for a moment I actually felt something close to control. My arm throbbed, my knee stung with every movement. I was breathing hard, sweat starting to gather at my hairline despite the cool air of the arena. But I was still standing, still moving, still meeting every attempt the drone made instead of freezing in place. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. I could not tell if 10 seconds had passed or 80. Every hit landed differently than I expected. Every recovery took more effort than the last, and somewhere in the middle of it all, I stopped thinking about the crowd entirely. It became just me and the drone, and the next second I needed to survive. Then, finally, Vel's voice rang out across the arena, calling the time. The drone powered down instantly, its arms folding back against its body as it drifted quietly toward its docking station, as calm and unaffected as if nothing at all had happened. I stood in the center of the mat, chest heaving, arm throbbing, knee stinging, sweat cooling against my skin, and for one long moment, absolutely nobody made a sound. Then, slowly, the silence broke into a wave of murmurs that spread from row to row, translator devices working overtime to keep up with 40 different languages, all asking the same thing at once. Vel looked down at his data pad, then back up at me, his expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. He announced, for the official record, that the trial had been completed in full. The human delegate had engaged directly, sustained several impacts without requesting an early end, and remained active for the entire duration. He asked if I needed medical attention. I shook my head, told him I was fine, and reached for my jacket on the railing. My arm was definitely going to bruise. My knee was scraped and sore, but I was smiling, and I did not even realize it until a tall, four-armed delegate near the front row leaned toward his neighbor and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, that the human girl was smiling. I had not noticed until he pointed it out. Walking back up the ramp, I could feel dozens of eyes still on me, alien faces of every shape and color watching in a mixture of confusion and something close to respect. My mother met me at the top with her hands pressed over her mouth. Somewhere between relief and disbelief of her own, she hugged me tightly, careful of my arm, and whispered that she could not believe I had actually done it. Later that night, back in our quarters aboard the station, my hands finally stopped shaking somewhere in the middle of dinner. My mother kept glancing at the bruise forming along my forearm, asking again if I was truly all right. I told her I was, and I meant it. It hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that faded, not the kind that lingered. What none of us realized that night was that the story of the trial had already spread far beyond that single arena. Reports moved quietly through diplomatic channels between dozens of worlds, each one trying to explain what exactly had happened when every single alien delegation refused a simple test, and one 17-year-old human volunteered without hesitation. I did not learn until much later that those reports all repeated some version of the same idea, that humans seemed to face sudden pressure differently than anyone expected, that fear, for us, did not always mean stepping back. They were not entirely right about that. I had been terrified standing on that mat. My hands trembled long after the trial ended, but being afraid and stepping forward anyway were never the same thing, And somehow, in that moment, nobody else in that entire dome had been willing to learn the difference. I did not do it because I was fearless. I did it because 90 seconds is not very long, because somebody needed to go first, and because I was tired of watching adults hesitate. Sometimes that is really all it takes. Not courage in some grand, dramatic sense, just a girl removing her jacket, stepping onto a mat, and deciding that 90 seconds was a price worth paying.